It's time for Twit This Week in Tech. We have a great panel for you. Sam Lessin makes his triumphant return, general partner at Slow Ventures. He's also an intern at The Information. Owen Thomas is here, brand new managing editor at the San Francisco Business Times. And old friend Jason Hiner, editor-in-chief of ZDNet. There's a bunch to talk about. The big Google trial started this week. Apple's got a new phone. Find out why Sam has a bunch of old phones in the freezer. And we'll talk about the Elon Musk biography. Has anyone read it? It's all coming up next on Twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Tech, episode 945, recorded Sunday, September 17th, 2023. The iPhone in the freezer. This Week in Tech is brought to you by Miro. Miro is your team's online workspace to connect, collaborate, and create together. Tap into a way to map processes, systems, and plans with the whole team. Get your first 3 boards for free to start creating your best work yet at Miro.com/podcast. And by ExpressVPN. Stop handing over your personal data to internet service providers. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/twit. And by Mint Mobile. Inflation is everywhere, whether it's gas, utilities, or your favorite streaming services. Thankfully, Mint Mobile can give you a much-needed break. Get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free. Go to mintmobile.com/twit. It's time for Twit This Week in Tech, the show where we cover the week's tech news, of which there is a bit. Fortunately, I have a premier team on the panel this week. Let's say hello first to Jason Hiner, who is editor-in-chief of ZDNet. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Leo. Glad to be here.
Long-time friend, always welcome on our network. Speaking of longtime friends, Owen Thomas is also here. You may remember him from Protocol. He's got a new gig, managing editor of the San Francisco Business Times. Perfect for you.
It's San Francisco, it's business, and I guess it's time. So
it's time,
you
man.
might like.
It's time. So good to see you again. And somebody we haven't seen in, I don't know, maybe a decade or more.
No, it hasn't been that long, Leo, but it's
Come on. It's so great to have Sam Lessin on. I was telling you before the show, I'm kind of intimidated. You're a big shot, and I always am nervous about asking big shots on the show, but not that Owen and Jason aren't. Actually, come to think of it, you're all big shots. Anyway, I'm glad to get you.
I'm not. So
always great to be on the show, Leo.
Yeah. I always feel like somewhat less than our panelists, but that's okay. General partner at Slow Ventures, but you may know him best as the intern at The Information. And happy to say, host of a brand new podcast called More or Less, featuring the Morons and the Lessons, which is
We're
pretty
having fun
cool.
with it.
What a great name. What do you talk about?
You know, every week we kind of do, one topic of the week. This last episode we had a episode all about Apple's launch events and whether they're carbon neutral-ish. But we have a lot of fun with it.
Oh, that's what we're going to talk about today. That's perfect.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm unprepared, but the Morons are generally more into things, and the Lessons are a little less skeptical. So we have a hook.
That is excellent. That really is excellent. And it is really, as I was saying before the show, Silicon Valley royalty. Jessica Lessin, of course, founder of The Information. Sam's been around forever. I think I first found out about you was it Drop.io? Dropio?
Yeah. 2007 era. I think when we got back in the day.
What a great app that was.
It was a different internet.
Yeah, really fantastic. And of course, Dave Morin, Facebook guy. I think I insulted him once. I was interviewing about Facebook. I said, how are you going to keep it from being classmates.com? And I think he was actually literally pissed off. So don't mention my name. I'm just saying, don't mention my name. He's gone on to other things. He started Path, which was without a doubt the best social network ever. And it just kills me that they didn't make a run of that, because it would have been better than anything else. The idea was only 50 friends.
a lot of the path innovations have found their way into a lot of other great apps. So has a place in the history.
And Britt, of course, who worked at Google. What is Britt Morin doing these days?
Well, they have a fund called Offline Ventures. I'm an LP, proudly.
So you're Slow Ventures, and they're Offline Ventures.
Yeah, exactly. Similar heritage.
This is what happens to Gen Z. They lose interest, and they just kind of fade away. Anyway, it's great to have all three of you on the show. Let's start with Apple, since you are prepared, Sam, to talk about it. Apple had its event on Tuesday and announcing the new iPhone 15, which is just this much better. Without Johnny Ive to say, this is the best iPhone we've ever made, it's just this much better than the last iPhone. They also announced an update. And when I say this much better, it really is appropriate for the new Apple Watch, which has one new feature, a gesture. That's it. And they spent 20 minutes with Octavia Spencer trying to say, let me ask you, Sam, was it your opinion that was greenwashing?
That is my opinion. That is not Dave's opinion, if you know, from our debate on this. But look, I mean, there's no question that, carbon neutrality, the environment is a great marketing position, especially for a company that isn't really releasing very many new features. I think they've done plenty of market research on this. Again, I still applaud them for making an effort. It's better than saying nothing. But, I think the problem is that, the environment is probably one of the only places that is even bigger than Apple, right, in terms of their approach to it. And so it's nice that they say some marketing messages around that, but they're not going to have a meaningful impact. It just feels like if they're only going to launch USB-C, which they have to, it's really that, this was an Apple event brought to you by Europe. Then they might as well kind of, play a big message they know is going to work well in the audience they're trying to sell.
I share your cynicism. I mean, here's a company saying, buy more gadgets, but you can buy these 3 green Apple Watches, so you don't feel so bad about it, kind of a thing. What do you think, Owen? Is Apple the environmental paragon?
I mean, I think they are the environmental marketing paragon.
Yes.
When they started milling, MacBook shells out of aluminum, they made a big deal out of how aluminum was this great material, and that's all true. But like, how much energy did it take to cut out the shells? The way they did it, people pointed out there was actually some waste there.
Huge waste, because they're taking a block of aluminum and grinding it out and throw away all the filings, or maybe they recycle them, but still.
Well, no, I mean, like you can melt down the filings and use them immediately.
Right.
Like, that's a great thing, aluminum. I think there's always an element of hype here. I'm interested actually in their commitment to eliminate plastic in packaging. I think that actually, if you've ever had the experience of like, you buy a new Apple product and it's like, okay, now I've got the box, and then the box inside the box, and then like, it's like it all unfolds very elegantly, but you're left with like 10 times as much packaging as like the actual object.
Yeah. We were actually talking. There was an article a couple of weeks ago that said people don't throw away their Apple boxes because they're so nicely made. And I asked, and everybody on the panel still had the Apple boxes for like most of their Apple gear that they'd ever bought. I recycle mine, but it's hard to break them down.
Yeah, I think I can see that, especially for laptops, more because like you might think about shipping them, and like the box is already a built-in shipping,
right? Right.
Shipping device. But yeah, I think there is an element of like Apple fanboy that doesn't want to get rid of the box because it's nice.
Part of the issue also, Apple says we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. Part of the issue, though, is what does carbon neutral mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, are they buying
unclear.
carbon credits? I suspect they are, right? It's one thing if you say we're going to make all of our network operations center run on solar or hydro. That's great. But I think a lot of times it's just, but we're going to buy some tree credits that we're going to plant somewhere, and that'll make
and for what it's worth, I mean, having spent a fair amount of time looking at the carbon markets, because I do think it'd be a fascinating path, they're a disaster, right? Like in terms of people, no two carbon credits are really equal. A lot of them are completely fake and made up. There are higher quality and lower quality credits. It's possible they're buying super high quality credits that are meaningful, but it's extremely hard to understand or trace.
It's hard to know. Yeah.
Also, I mean, that's the problem with the whole thing, right? Is like without some sort of measurement infrastructure at a global scale that can be validated, plug for, at least in theory, crypto, just theoretically, right? It's the whole idea of creating carbon markets, which are meaningful, is extremely challenging.
So I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here, because there's certainly the segment was beautifully produced, but it was too long. It was sort of oddly placed in the presentation. The carbon credit things, there were some things that were greenwashing, like the part where it said, with the Apple Watch, we know there are this many people charging their Apple Watches every day. And so in order to offset that, we're going to, do, they were talking about the things that they're going to do to do that, buying carbon credits or that. And to Sam's point, some of that is very hard to define and also hard to kind of like balance the, the weights there of what they did. That said, they are a big company that produces a lot of products, millions and millions of products, and choices matter. And they are they realize that they have the potential to have a lot of negative impact on the world, on the planet, with the things that they do and with their business model. And they are making some choices to try to do things more responsibly. They talked about the 25%, the packaging being 25% less, so they can put 25% more of them on boats when they ship them, right? So that has a very material impact. The choice of materials that are more polluting or that are more energy, that consume energy and have bad effects on energy and the environment, leather, other kinds of non-renewable materials. I think those things have important impacts, and certainly it's worth highlighting doing it. It's really hard in a presentation like this, doing something so self-congratulatory, though, is really sort of, I think, the thing that rubbed a lot of people, even real Apple fans, I saw somewhat rubbed the wrong way by this. I didn't get rubbed the wrong way, mostly because I'm there sort of evaluating, analyzing the thing. But I think it's one of those things that doing it with humor helped. They were in some cases a little bit self-deprecating, but it went on too long. And in the end, it still was pretty self-congratulatory, I would rather have seen them say, this is a challenge. We know there's a lot of work to do and we're leaning into it. Here are the things we're doing to try to be responsible and make things better. And we have other goals we want to accomplish. And here are some of the ways we're going to do them and hold us accountable to these things. I think if they would have said something like that, it would have felt a little bit more, a little less disingenuous, perhaps.
I just think, look, it's like you do more efficient shipping containers, good for you. That drops your bottom line. Wall Street's super excited, et cetera, right? Trying to consumerize that story and have your cake and eat it too, which is, we should do that. Forget the environment. That's just good business, right? And trying to kind of turn that into a pro-consumer story is a little rich in my mind.
Hey, but they have a new logo with a little green Apple stem. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's and then there's other stuff. It's look, the real environmental questions are going to be things like AI and the amount of water and energy we're going to pour into AI. I'm looking forward to Apple's story when, and they're in a very challenging position with a lot of these AI stories and what comes next and things like that. I think those are going to be the much bigger impact stories. This really feels to me like someone did the market research and figured out they could have their cake and eat it too, because the stuff that makes them money turns out to be stuff that a segment of buyers are going to feel less bad about buying a new iPhone, when really the environmental choice is to do what I do and use old phones.
Yes.
Right.
And to their credit, Apple,
certainly not the story Apple wants people to really think about.
Yeah, but to their credit, they have a very good trade-in program, and there was a great article in the New York Times a few weeks back about the company that does the recycling for Apple, and they said, we sell 15,000 iPhone 8s a day because of Apple's aggressive trade-ins and upcycling. And I think that's a good. I'll defend Apple a little bit. If you're going to put 1 billion phones in people's pockets, you're going to put 1 billion phones in the landfill eventually. But it's at least good for you to do something about them. And what's the choice? Well, I guess we won't sell. We'll decide maybe we shouldn't sell phones or watches anymore. Let's sell. If you're going to be in that business, you're going to be in that business. And I guess to their credit, they're trying to do the best they can.
I agree. I do think the greatest trick they could possibly pull would be somehow to figure out how to like slow the refresh cycle and charge you more. Right, that would be the true business environment win, right?
Oh yeah,
we can sell
we'll tell you, we're going to charge you $1,000 a year, but you don't get a new phone for 3 years.
That's right. That's the real environment win.
The market has kind of done that for them, right? So the upgrade cycle has lengthened, continued to lengthen to 3 or 4 years. And what has happened because of that? Apple now sells its higher end phones for more, and they've become the best selling. Their highest end phone become the best selling phone.
So if they made a video which lauded the slower upgrade cycle as the greatest impact on the environment and how wonderful it was that people weren't buying their phones as quickly,
the stock market would kill them. The stock market would murder them. Gosh. Right?
That'd be a great video. I'd applaud that video.
Yeah, as the stock tanks. You said you did research into carbon credits. Do you know of some good companies, or is that not clear, Sam?
I got to say, I love a free market solution to the environment, theoretically. Like, I would love to see rich carbon markets that worked, and I actually think there is a story in theory where it should work. And so I spent a bunch of time looking at a lot of startups doing a lot of versions of it. And candidly, after a lot of research, have so far invested in basically nothing because I can't find angles that I believe that scale that make sense. Now, again, I've been wrong 1,000 times in my career, and I'll be wrong 1,000 times again. And I really pray to God that there are startups out there that are doing it in a way that's going to unlock the market, because it is the only solution, right? It's going to be a market-based solution, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah, maybe it's a guilty conscience, maybe not, but we buy carbon credits for the business. We try to offset what we do. We don't have a big green twit logo, but we try, just because Lisa and I want to make sure that we do everything we can. And I wish there were somewhere I could go to and know that those credits were really going to make a difference.
Well, don't worry, Leo. Adam Newman is fixing the problem.
Oh, I bet. We plant. It's not WeWork now. It's We Plant, right? They're going to plant.
I wish I were kidding, but his new startup is a crypto-based carbon credit trading company.
Oh. And the thing about that, Owen, that's so frustrating is like, that is exactly the right tweet. That's the tweet I want to be real. That's the headline I would love to be real. Unfortunately, it's not, right? But that I was, again, like that is in some ways what's most frustrating about some of these things is you see it and you're like, yes, I'm so excited for this at the headline level. Unfortunately, when you dig in, it's just not there.
Yeah, at Protocol we had teams focused on both fintech and on clean tech, and so we collaborated and looked into it. And the problem is that you can put like a financialized crypto wrapper around the carbon credit, but if the underlying carbon credit is not, representative of some fiscal and environmental reality, then the crypto adds nothing. So
Newman's new company is called Flowcarbon, backed by $70 million from Andreessen Horowitz. The current system of buying and selling carbon credits is built on an opaque and fractured market infrastructure, says one of the slides. We're carbon market experts, blockchain specialists, and environmentalists. So
have they pivoted to AI yet?
Yeah. I mean, Bitcoin's over. Don't you know that? It's all about AI. And I have to say, when you're talking about environment and crypto, it does seem almost an oxymoron. Yes.
No, I think that's a much. I'm not sure you want to have an entire episode on that one, Leo. Like, I think that, like, in theory, it's a long and deep story. I think the story of crypto being bad for the environment is generally greatly overstated. I'd also say, like, the reality is that if you want solutions, right, for open financial market infrastructure that you could use to solve carbon problems, it's the only game you're going to get in town. So I don't think it's quite so. That's kind of one where I'd say, and kind of the opposite, which is the tweet sounds good, but the reality is a little more complicated, and I'm a little less cynical about it.
Okay. It is the 1-year anniversary of the Ether merge this week, and they're claiming 99% drop in energy usage, which is fantastic. It's using proof of stake instead of proof of work. Bravo. Okay. Maybe we will do a whole show, Sam. Not
We
now.
can do a whole show.
Not
that
now.
one's tough.
But I think that's an interesting. I think it's a very interesting subject. As is carbon credits, as is Apple. Any of you going out to buy the iPhone 15?
Can I just say Apple has sucked all of the joy out of the new iPhone cycle? Like, remember when people stood in line and now they don't want the chaos at the stores, I get it. It's stressful for
So instead there's chaos online because I have to get at 5 a.m. Pacific. I was on the East Coast, thank God, so it was only 8 a.m. Get on the Apple Store on Friday and fight the server crashes. And finally did get an order in, but a lot of people didn't. And this happens every year, don't they know?
They've got to be doing. They've got to be doing it on purpose. I promise you.
They're creating a virtual line, is what they're doing.
Apple is not the best at software in the world, but they're not that bad, right? They're doing. Don't
forget, this is a company
on the Apple
that
website.
until recently used web objects for its website. So maybe they aren't the best.
It's honestly it's a great FU to the world. It would be a $3 trillion company, let your website crash.
Yeah. You're trying to buy a $1,300 phone, in my case, $1,600 phone? Not today, buddy.
Doesn't it make you feel special, Leo?
Oh my
it's
God.
Like that's the whole shtick. That's the shtick.
Like this. I just want to give you $3,000 right now. Can you please, I beg of you, let me. Nope.
I think some of the challenges, supply chains, they wait so late, I think sometimes to finalize the product. And so once you end sort of the cycle and you're like, okay, we're manufacturing these, like it takes time. Like you're only gonna make so many. And remember, there were a number of reports that the Pro models especially were going to be delayed this year. Yeah. They weren't, but what it came down to is and it played out exactly as we expected, which was they're not going to be delayed, but they're going to have a small amount, and you're going to see in the first 10 minutes, all of a sudden the dates to get it are going to get pushed out back.
But that's different than the servers crashing. I give you that. It's
fair.
That's problems all around. It's problems all around. Let me just see. I'm going to try to order an iPhone.
I bet they turned down their servers right before they launched just to make it feel.
Don't be too fast. Let's see. I'm going to buy this $1,400 phone.
Don't be too eager to sell it.
No Apple Care.
That whole shtick of
it's now
Apple
November 7th.
Wow. Yeah. But Leo, that whole shtick of the Apple Store being taken offline, right before an event,
they don't have to do that.
That is marketing.
Oh, we're stocking the shelves. What do they have to do? They don't have to. No one else does that.
Look, I've got my 13 minis. I have about 10 of them in boxes. My wife recently went to China on a reporting trip.
You bought 13 iPhone minis?
I have 10 because then they didn't discontinue them as the best phone ever.
They did.
It's the best phone ever.
They did. They've discontinued them.
Sam, are you a Touch ID holdout?
I'm not. I'm okay with it. But they're great phones. And my wife was recently going to China. She asked me for one of my wrapped phones because she wanted a clean phone to go to China with.
Smart, yeah.
And I told her, no, go buy another phone. These are mine.
You wouldn't give up one of your 10 minis.
Okay, now I'm just going to say what one of our hosts, Steve Gibson, who has the same kind of fetish, he has, for instance, I think a half dozen Palm 7s in his freezer because same thing. Oh, they're not going to make
the batteries healthy.
To keep the batteries healthy. So, Sam, I'm just saying, wrap those so there's no moisture, and then put them in your freezer.
I bet if you did that in about 10 years on eBay, you could sell them for a lot of money.
Yeah.
Perfectly preserved. It's on. I heard recently. Apparently, my Canon. So I don't throw technology out. So I have all my original digital cameras.
Oh wow!
And someone was telling me that apparently the kids these days are really into early 2000s Canon power shots.
Yeah.
They love the look and feel of them. And so they've come back and apparently they're going for crazy prices. And so I'm like, that's good because I have a lot of them, but they're not preserved that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim, do you think that's is it part of the rejection of I'm going to post this immediately on Instagram? You have no way of, you take the photo and you're actually more present with a digital camera?
I mean, I think that's a reasonable thing. I think it's also just the reality is technology's gotten so good, it's just become fashion, right? Especially social media.
That's right.
Fashion goes in cycles, right? And so we went from a super res. By the way, the one thing I will say I thought was very cool from the announcements was a lot of the spatial camera stuff. That's pretty freaking cool.
Are you bullish on the Vision Pro? Are you bullish on that?
I mean, it's pretty cool, right? Like, I think that it's hard. All my cynicism aside, it's very hard to knock that part of what they're doing.
Oh, I knock it fully.
It is.
I knock it fully. That is a total waste. Just look what Mark Zuckerberg's done with $10 billion every year. It is such a waste of money, such a waste of effort. They've made a technologically beautiful thing that no one's going to buy.
Well, Leo, I think that's true on a multi-year basis. Here's what I basically say. One is there's a difference between the capture and the device. The fact that your camera is getting enabled with LiDAR and a bunch of other cool stuff, that means you can capture things that were historically hard to capture. I mean, I think that in the future, just will we look back at photos from 100 years ago and we're like, these are very beautiful, but like, there's no, like, I don't have a sense of my great-great-grandfather. People are going to look back at our pre-LiDAR photos and say, wow, like, that's beautiful.
It was so 2D.
Leo, I'm gonna make a prediction, Leo. You are gonna try. You're gonna take a spatial video with the iPhone when you and Lisa go on an awesome vacation somewhere, and you're gonna come back and you're gonna do it in the Vision Pro, and you're gonna go, all right, I'm sold.
No, I think completely the opposite. In fact, I've bought the Ricoh Theta 360 camera, then the Insta 360 camera.
Those are so different than this, though.
But I have a 360-degree tour of the Roman Forum, walking through it with a guide explaining stuff. I haven't looked at it once.
Well, Leo, I think that's unfair. I love the Insta 360. Let's talk consumer products. I think it's an incredible product. I agree that the tour that everyone else has and is already on the internet is not that interesting in Insta 360, but personal stuff, things like that, the ability to kind of reframe and rezoom and pull the right stuff out. I'm a huge Insta 360 fan.
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole thinking is I can go back and edit this. And actually, that is the more interesting thing, which is to, in effect, turn it into a 2D movie. But you've been shooting everything all the way around you, and then you choose what to look at. So you can look around.
Well, that's the point. The point is that you
it's
can
the opposite of spatial, though. You're really going for a...
No, but you need the spatial to be able to do it. It's kind of like being able to, saying I actually think that it might be that you love the camera because it makes your 2D videos and your 2D photos dramatically better for the next 10 years, right? You don't need the Vision Pro to succeed for the spatial capture to make sense. Your AI stuff will be way cooler with more data, whatever. It's clearly the future. The Vision Pro stuff, the VR stuff, in the arc of history, eventually has to be true, right? But it might take a very long time, right? Like, we're not close. That's what I would say.
On Apple, the feature you're talking about, Apple says you turn your camera sideways, so you're using the two lenses in the triangle that are on the top. This is only with the Pro versions, and then you take a picture. It's going to use both lenses. Just like your two eyes do, to not create a 360-degree image. It's not the same thing. It's going to create an image that has depth. Kind of like, remember the ViewMaster? It'll be basically a ViewMaster. And God, that changed the world, didn't it?
I mean, I will say I've not been, I think the last time I was on here, we were talking about VR, and I remember the Vision Pro was about to be announced, and I was like, and the timing couldn't be better, because VR has been such a non-starter,
right?
And metaverse has been such a crash and burn.
It's like I'm last to the party and everybody's already gone.
But I do think so. Having tried the Vision Pro and done the demo, the thing the only thing that really had the emotional reaction was those spatial photos and videos.
Okay.
Like
you've seen them. I haven't seen them. I don't know what it looks like. So you've seen them.
So that's the thing. That's the must see that everybody, when these things come out in Q1 and you put it on and you go do a demo, the one thing you have to see, the one thing that's really impressive that has the most kind of emotional impact is all those photos and videos. And when you see it, you immediately think, or I did, and apparently, Apple, the team that worked on this at Apple had the same reaction when they first saw one of their members of their team did one of these spatial, had a couple little kids, like toddlers, and it had an emotional reaction to everybody on the team. They're like, we have to put this in the product. And when I saw it, the first thing I thought, it was emotional. I was like, man, if I had this when my kids were little, or if I had this when I went on, this trip or something, to be able to go back into that moment. Cause it's more like stepping into a memory than it is looking at a photo or a video.
Right. And look, I think if you look at the history of this stuff here, like this idea that, that video is super compelling in these environments is not new, right? If you go back 10 years, the original Oculus was all about, and like you can be live at the concert and all this stuff. I think is kind of bullshitty, because the reality is I'd rather see the edited thing with the director choosing the views and whatever. That's because at the time, the capture side was too hard. If you wanted to do that type of capture, you're using a crazy rig with like 15 GoPros and re-editing it. It was impossible.
Or $60,000 camera. Yeah.
So unlocking and putting effectively a camera that's capable of producing that data in everyone's hands, right, in the next few years, I do think actually unlocks it, which is I don't care about the concert in that format, but I do care about my kids swimming in the pool and that. And, am I going to review every moment of their lives? Of course not. But having, the highlight reels and be able to pull it back and do that kind of reminiscing, I think it's inevitable. And like the tech is very cool, is what I would say. So the carbon credit's not so much, but I actually am. That will be, if I end up getting off of my kick for old iPhones, it will be because of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, he has 10 iPhone minis in his freezer. It's an amazing thing.
Well, they're not in my freezer yet, but they will be.
They should be, Sam.
Talk about carbon neutral. What's going to be the carbon impact of me freezing 10 phones for a decade?
In Korea, they have kimchi freezers. You can have an iPhone freezer.
There you go. It's like a kimchi freezer only for technology.
Actually, there's kimchi fridge, but there you go, iPhone freezer.
So this is actually the most interesting point I think I've heard about the Apple event is this single ability to do spatial stills. They're not videos, spatial stills. And of course, it would make sense that if you're going to sell a product like the Vision Pro, you've got to get going on making products people can use to create content for it. And maybe this is the
opposite. Sorry, Leo. It was the opposite. They announced spatial video. We're assuming it's also spatial photos are in it, but they announced that spatial video coming to both Pro and Pro Max.
Oh, it was video. I misunderstood.
It was.
No, coming to the Pro, but the camera, when you turn it on its side, you're taking videos with those two lenses or stills? I thought it was stills.
Video. They announced spatial video. That's right. They did.
Okay. I misunderstood. All right. But really, I think Sam and I are saying stills are what you want.
Well, I want video too. I mean, video, it's all the same. I mean, hard to argue you want video. The whole point is more immersive, and you only want stills.
Okay, fine. and you're right. I do remember, Jason Hiner, people who were playing with the Vision Pro. There were a few things that they kept talking about. One was the monster coming out of the closet, and the other was watching Avatar. It's the idea of this. You're wearing this thing, but it feels like you're in this 3D environment.
Right. And I will just say again, the monster coming out of the monster coming out of the closet in Oculus 1.0 a bajillion years ago was a shark demo. The shark came out of nowhere. Oh my God, there's a shark. It was really stupid, but people really liked it. Right. And the immersive video was there's a music, you can go stand on stage with some music artists. Those are not the wrong ideas, right? The question is just how many years does it take to get them to the point where those are actually the experiences people want? And then how much content, where do you get the content from that matters? Because again, I don't think, the actual music video is going to be better than you standing on stage with the band in VR.
Okay. Hey, what a great panel. It's great to have Owen Thomas here. Congratulations on the new gig. San Francisco Business Journal, managing editor. Business Times, I'm sorry. Let's get it right. It says bizjournals.com/San Francisco, but it's the Business Times.
It's part of a nationwide chain, and most of the publications are city name Business Journal. San Francisco has to be different because San Francisco is different.
There you go. It's all about the Times. Just glad to see you gainfully employed, basically, Owen. That's all I'm saying. No, I'm just teasing. You are fantastic, and they deserve you. So I'm glad to see that. Sam Lessin, who has not been here in an age. He is an intern at The Information, which incidentally is a mighty fine publication in its own right. It's the most expensive thing I subscribe to. Maybe Bloomberg's more. Bloomberg might be more, but it's close. You're expensive, but it's worth it. The Information does breaking so many great stories, doing so much good work. So I'm glad you're bringing them coffee, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's what I do. It's all my wife.
Yeah.
I bring the coffee.
People don't know the founder is Jessica Lessin, who's somehow related to Sam in some obscure way that we're not sure of. And by the way, it's doing quite well, I think. I get the impression. You're hiring, you're growing like crazy. So good job.
Well, I'll say I literally do just get the coffee, but they've built, they're coming up on their 10th anniversary.
Wow.
It's, from day one, grown very nicely year over year consistently. They've been hiring throughout. Because of their business model and kind of their story, their focus on just breaking news you can't read anywhere else. They've attracted a really great audience. And, candidly, there's obviously a lot of blood in the water in the media world, but they've really not been part of that because they just have a very different model.
I'll tell you from the outside, from day one, that this was a worthy thing for me to pay for. You have really good reporters. And they are constantly breaking stories and giving insight that I just can't get anywhere else. So much so to the point that you read everybody quoting the information. And so I think it just shows journalistic quality will out. It really is about quality.
Yeah. Well, my wife, was at the Wall Street Journal for 8 years before starting it. And, as was the early team is all people. And she started the information primarily because it wasn't about being a business, right? It was about saying I can create an economy that allows me to do the types of stories that I think are most important and allows, other people to do them, and we can, pay for it and grow with great journalism. So I think that's just it's a very different starting point, to be founded by a journalist for a journalistic reason, but also not in a nonprofit way, right? Where you're like money doesn't matter. The point is if you build the best economic engine, you can pay for the best journalism, right? And so I think that's kind of that approach from day one has served them super well. And it's been amazing to see for a decade now, just a lot of growth every year consistently. They've been profitable every year they've existed and just kind of churning it out.
I had the same idea, but I made a kind of seminal mistake, which is I decided to do podcasts. and if only. No, I think we didn't start Twit because we wanted to make a business or anything. I wanted to do the coverage that we would like to do, that we want to do with the people I knew that were smart and good. And that I think you have to have that foundation. You really do. So congratulations. And we will talk about the review, Adam Lashinsky's review of the Elon Musk book in just a little bit because it's good. He says, it's long and behind the scenes moments, plus just plain long. Also with us, Jason Hiner, the wonderful Jason Hiner, known you since the Tech Republic days, now editor-in-chief of all of ZDNet. Has been his long march to run the whole damn thing. Good job. Well done.
Thank you. And also like a hat tip to you and to the folks at the information, Sam and the team over there of like mission-based media, right? Of like starting something like we're going to create the thing that we wish we had.
Yes.
It's such a great way to start any venture, right? Is we're going to create the thing that we think is missing in the world and we wish there was more of it. No matter what business you're in, that's a great place to start. But in media, it's a wonderful place to start because so much of it has been dominated by forces outside of our control that have changed and morphed so much of the media. And so, really hats off to you, Leo. And
I don't think it was in the case of Jessica, this is true, but for me, it was just pure bitterness. I was just bitter over Tech TV, and I just said I just going to do it myself. Screw them.
You and Jessica compare notes because the story she tells, which I was there for as the husband on the outside, was she basically she mentioned this recently. One of the things that really pushed her over the edge of the Journal was she was there and they made her live tweet or live blog an Apple event.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is so worthless.
Yeah.
She's like, everyone's covering this. This is not what I want to be spending my time on. And so she said, screw it. I'm going to go, how many great stories that matter can I write a year? How many can I get great other people to write? And can we make a business? Because there's a lot of people who will pay for it.
Wow, that's great. So she was bitter too. Good. We hate mainstream media. Let's just screw them and do our own thing. That's it. That's good. You're going to make me live tweet. In fact, in a way, it's related because I got thrown out of an Apple event for trying to stream it, and I've never been back. So
There you go. It all goes back to like the real question that we have to ask.
Full circle.
Is what media company was just started at the most recent Apple event?
Yeah. Every single time. Hey, we'll be back with more with this great panel and lots more to talk about, including Google's day in court this week. And as I said, the Walter Isaacson bio, which came out this week, of some guy, Elon something. But first, a word from our sponsor, Miro, M-I-R-O. I've seen cognitive scientists say, we all know this experience. When you go from one room to another to get something, and by the time you get in the other room, you go, what was it? I can't remember what I was there for. And I've seen cognitive scientists say this is because you're context switching, and your brain is set up that when you switch context, it's like, empty the stack and start over. Blast the stack, and we're going to start all over. And so you go, I forgot. What am I doing here? The thing is, this happens in business, too. This happens with your designers and your product team and your coders and your marketers. They're going from tab to tab and tool to tool, and every step of the way, great ideas leak and dribble away. That's why you need Miro. Miro is the collaborative visual platform that brings everything you're doing together. Now, especially with hybrid work these days, no matter where your team is, no matter what time zone they're in, whether you're working from home, working in the office, it's all in one workspace online, one single source of truth everybody can work on. And you don't have to throw away all those tools you use because it integrates with everything. We use Google Drive and Zapier with our Miro stacks. It's really... it's just a place that it can all get together. Creating that one great product needs input from everybody, and Miro does it so well with its capabilities to democratize collaboration and input. It can flatten the hierarchy. And you want that too, because you want great ideas no matter where they come from. Miro's infinite shared boards give product teams a perpetual space where they can simply drag and drop insights and data. Nothing's lost, nothing's forgotten. You can zoom in if you want the details. You can zoom out if you want the 30,000-foot view. Miro covers a breadth of use cases. You can build visual assets. You can present findings. You can run brainstorms with cross-functional teams. If you do Zoom or Google Meet or, if you do video calls, who doesn't these days, you'll love the timers built in, the icebreakers. You can build out your product vision on a Miro board by brainstorming in the way you want. You want a mood board? Go ahead. Sticky notes. You want comments, live reactions. You want a voting tool, a timer. It's all there. You can express yourself in creative ways and bring the whole group together around one idea. It can happen however you like to work, with a quick wireframe or sketching it out with the pen tool or cutting and pasting images and mock-ups. Miro users say they save up to 80 hours a user per year. That's 2 weeks vacation per year by streamlining conversations and cutting down meetings. And who doesn't want to cut down meetings? The end result, Miro gives your team the chance to always stay connected to real-time information. It gives project managers and product leads a bird's-eye view of the whole project. Nothing slips through the cracks. Now that you've heard me describe it, is it any surprise more than 1 million users use Miro every single month? We use it and to great effect for planning our shows. And I kind of buried the lead, the best part. Get your first 3 Miro boards for free right now. Start working better. Miro.com/podcast. Miro.com/podcast. Once you get in there and create your account, I strongly encourage you to look at the Miroverse. Those are templates created by Miro users from all over the world, including like the UK government. And you can see how they use it. And you'll be really amazed at the variety and quality of the tool. It's really great. Miro, Miro.com/podcast. We thank them so much for supporting this little thing we call This Week in Tech. I did want to mention the Adam Leshinsky, who's great, his review of the Elon Musk book. You've probably read it by now. Jason, have you read the Elon Musk book?
I have not.
Sam, have you read the Elon Musk book?
Well, I read Leshinsky's review of it because
That's
it's in
all
the
you
information.
need. That's all you need. Owen, you, surely, managing editor of the San Francisco Business Times, you've read the Elon Musk book.
I will admit I have covered Elon Musk professionally for literally 25 years, and I have not read it yet.
670 pages.
I just have a stack of books to get through still, and I never seem to make a dent
I have to say, I've lost a little respect for Walter Isaacson. I think that his Jobs book was, the problem is you do authorized biographies, and this is authorized, right? It's going to taint it a little bit. For instance, the most notable example is in the book, Isaacson says that Elon Musk decided that he didn't want a nuclear war, so he turned off Starlink for a Ukrainian offensive against the Russians. When the Ukrainians found this out, they were furious. They were livid. But then, like 2 weeks later, Isaacson starts tweeting, oh, yeah, I didn't get that right. Oh, he didn't turn it off. He just didn't extend the cover. He's backpedaling as fast as he can from the clear factual statements of the book. And to me, it doesn't smell right. Did you get it wrong in the book, or are you making up your answer now?
Well, and what else did he get wrong in the book?
And then, exactly. And there's more of that, by the way. There's issues about full self-driving, where he implies that full self-driving never used machine learning, that it was always rule-based, and then an engineer came to Elon and said, look what we can do with machine learning. And by the way, that's great. That's a moat, because we have 10 million videos of our Tesla users that we can use to train it. No one else will have anything like that, and it's going to give us a huge advantage. And now we're talking to Sam at our car guy. He says, no, they've been using they've always been using machine learning. And oh, by the way, there's many companies that have these videos, as many videos. This is not a moat. Did Isaacson get it wrong? Is he getting fed propaganda by Elon that he's just saying, yeah, that's good, I'll write that.
Well, how on earth do you fact check?
I guess you can.
A book about a serial fabricator.
Right.
The serial fabricator is your primary source.
Right.
I don't see how you do it.
Yeah, and
just
I don't think
that.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, you just accept that things are going to be wrong or false or misleading or
Well, we call when it's politics, we call it beltway journalism, access journalism. When you have unusual access, when you can sit next to Nancy Pelosi and get access, it comes at a price. I prefer not to be persona non grata with Apple than to be, Steve Jobs' best friend. It comes at a price, and you've got to take what Elon tells you and write it down.
I'm going to show my tech coverage bias on this, but I don't think that Isaacson's deeply understands tech clearly.
Yes, I
felt that on the biography of Jobs.
Yes.
I felt like there's some things that were just so thin there. And I was like, if you had a better understanding of this stuff, there were some things that just were not either expressed well or were very thinly reported or missed the points of like, oh, that's where you should have actually dove deep on, and dug more. And so that's why I really did not have a whole lot of enthusiasm for this book, because you could argue that Elon is even more deeply technical than what Jobs was. And the things that he's working on are more deeply technical at a whole different level. And so I hate to say it, because I think Isaacson's other books, Einstein and
Kissinger,
Ben Franklin. Some of those were quite good. I just think he's a little out of his depth on this topic. He was on the Jobs topic, and I think even more so on this one. Fair. And so,
he's by the way, highly accomplished.
But the problem is,
go ahead.
I was going to say the problem is that again, Elon would never let an information reporter write the biography, right? Is what it comes down to, for obvious reasons, right? And so it's that's how you get their headline is exactly this. It's like it's Lessinski's like it shows the perils of access journalism for sure, right? And it just comes up short. I haven't read it. I probably will skim it at some point, or at least Control F the index.
Looking for your name? Is that what you do, Sam?
Unfortunately, I've had to do that a few times. It usually is not a good morning when that happens.
Yeah, you don't want to find your name in the index. This is what Lessinski writes. To look at it charitably, Isaacson found himself in a no-win situation. If he trashed his subject, who would trust him with their life story in the future? Less charitably, the accomplished author was seduced by Musk's power, and whether out of fear or fealty, he chose not to question it. We got to say, credit where credit's due. Isaacson is an extremely accomplished person. Besides those many biographies, he's a professor at Tulane. He was vice chair of the Louisiana Recovery Authority. He chaired the board that runs Voice of America. He's CEO and president of the Aspen Institute. He was the CEO of CNN, the editor at Time. I mean, the guy, it's kind of amazing. One person has such a rich CV. And maybe that's part of the problem is how can you be a tech expert? How can you be an expert on the subject matter when you're doing 15 other jobs at the same time?
I think the question is you got to, and I don't know the history here, maybe one of you guys do, is ask the question is like, why does this book even happen? Like, whose incentive is it for it to happen? Like, why did, Elon obviously has an incentive to shape a narrative. Is Isaacson trying to sell a bunch of books? Like, I would love to know the history because to me, it's like one of those ones where these things don't happen by accident, right? And I think you can kind of trace a lot of what's going to be written, right? And what the angle is by what the goal is.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good point.
It's also like writing a book about the World Series after Game 3, right? Like the World Series isn't over yet. Yeah. Like we still haven't decided.
Well, it's
there's
clear
a lot still have to do.
It's clear that the book about Elon Musk has yet to be written. Ashley Vance's book about Elon was very good as well. But same problem, Jason, is the game ain't over. Only history is going to tell us whether Elon was a success or a charlatan or what.
I do think, when someone becomes the world's richest man, especially as quickly and kind of unexpectedly as Musk did, it's kind of just sitting out there waiting for someone to write a book. And I can't blame Isaacson for pursuing that opportunity. It also fits in his genre of, of great inventors, even though Musk is kind of questionable on the,
I think if nothing else, we've learned from Elon's ownership of Twitter that the great man theory of history is utter BS. That these and boy, if you look at Kissinger, Franklin, Einstein, Jobs, Musk, clearly Isaacson believes in the great man theory. Like this one person can change the world through his force of personality. And that's a flaw right there, believing that myth,
I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I think Elon has changed the world based on his sheer personality and very little else, right? Like,
well, there's been a bit of government subsidy involved, if nothing.
Yeah, but look,
which is personality, right? Like he's been able to
talk the government into it. Yeah.
Look, I think it's very questionable how actually technically deep he is. I mean, candidly, I hope he's not that technically deep.
You mean Musk?
The deeper he is actually technically, the more of a liar he is. Right. But he's clearly the world's greatest marketer. There's no question about that. Right. And he's used that for some very good things. I mean, SpaceX is an unbelievable company that required a hell of a lot of marketing, and vision building to go anywhere. Like you needed someone like that to do it. Same thing with Tesla. I mean, Tesla's a sordid history, but the reality is he willed that through marketing to being. And so I think that actually it's funny you say it's not a great, I actually think the great man theory of history is for sure represented here. But I think what you might be saying, Leo, which I agree with, is it's not that, I mean, one, I think it's very questionable how technically deep he really is, right? In terms of, when you get into the details of this. But two, it's like great men aren't necessarily great at all things, right? And certainly, a great man doesn't mean they know. I mean, Jobs clearly had his failings, right? Elon obviously has failings. But it is interesting. My takeaway is that actually he's a very good representation of, what it means to will something to be, and probably nothing else.
Yeah. And to Isaacson's credit, this book, he was embedded in Elon's life for 2 years. This book was planned years before Elon bought Twitter, before he became the world's richest man, before he became known in the way that he's known today. This was originally commissioned back when he was Stark Industries. He was widely revered for the work he'd done. It's only been in the last few years that the feet of clay have showed up. And that's really my problem with the great man theory is it ignores all the other elements that got involved. And, is he P.T.
100%.
Barnum or is he, I don't know, what's the other side of P.T. Barnum?
Edison.
Edison
Ford,
was wait a minute, stop right there. Edison's a perfect example of a guy who in fact invented very little, but was brilliant at marketing.
But he still was a great man, Leo. I think this is the thing that you keep in mind. The same with Jobs. Like, look, one of the things that drives me nuts about Elon, right, is he'll get up on stage and kind of like, think about the fact that like, well, last night I was doing this calculation on blah, 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 blah. And I came to and you're like, you were not doing the calculation. You have like thousands of engineers doing the calculation, right? It's like, people say not to take credit for the work of others, or like it's all a team effort. Elon is not, it's a team effort. It's an Elon effort. It drives me nuts, right? But it's hard to argue that he's not a great man in terms of the impact he's been able to have. And, maybe P.T. Barnum was, certainly Edison was, even if they weren't the inventors, right? I think that's what's so frustrating about him as a character, is like a lot of the shtick is so, from my perspective, terrible, right? It's like a terrible shtick, but it's hard to argue with some of the results, right?
Yeah, I mean, the chat room pulled this out a little bit too. This whole, to get to your great man theory part, Leo, which was that, to push some of these ideas forward, very unconventional, very risky, very unpopular. It takes like this indomitable will. And Isaacson did mention this in one of the interviews. He said he's a jerk. Like and also look at a lot of the people who accomplished a lot of things they did. They were jerks too, right? Ford and Edison and many of these.
You could almost say that, with the exception of maybe Einstein, that Isaacson likes jerks. I mean, Kissinger, Franklin, for all we revere him as a founding father, was kind of an ass. Jobs, not the nicest man. Maybe it isn't the great man. Maybe it's both. Well,
I think the question is he a great man and is he a good man? And I think
there is a difference, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
very few good men are great men.
And I think the disturbing thing is that, and where I challenge people who just characterize him as a jerk, annoying, he's rude. He has behaved very unethically, very immorally including to people very close to him, and in business. So I think it is we need to be careful in kind of dismissing him as, he's a jerk, but it's okay because, he brought us electric cars. I think especially with Twitter/X, the consequences of someone who is maybe not immoral, but amoral, running, an important public utility, what is essentially an important public utility, even though it's a privately owned company. I think we're seeing that play out.
Yeah. Well, and if anything, you learn the truth of the matter which is no one is one-dimensional. And that's my biggest problem with the great man theory. It implies that somehow leaders are born, not made, that they emerge from the earth, whole formed, and change everything for us. And it really is always much more complex.
And I would say that, like, look, the Starlink thing, it's kind of a funny subtlety to argue about whether it wasn't turned on or was turned off, is like, it's a classic defaults. It's literally like the defaults from websites issue played out at like war at global scale with satellites, right? The exact same thing. It's like, what was the box checked or unchecked to start, right?
All we know is that we don't want a private individual to make these huge global decisions.
Well, especially, and this goes with this similar to Twitter, especially when that person's track record of, decision making and is pretty spotty on this stuff. So it's one thing, in some ways maybe it's good that, this is a situation because it forces a hard question sooner, rather than if Elon Musk was, Mother Teresa, we might be like, Elon's got the satellites, but it's not that he's doing the right stuff with them. Right. And so I think this is a big societal question we're going to have to digest as power has been centralized in some of these interesting choke points and, how we think about them going forward.
One Ukrainian official said Musk committed evil by either turning it off or on, unchecking or checking the box. I mean,
I don't know if you remember the interview with Jobs and Gates that
All Things Deep, Kara and Walt did. Yeah.
Kara and Walt did. In that, the most poignant thing of the whole thing for me was Walt saying to the two of them that, you all get a lot of credit for things that are done by a whole army of people.
That's a good point too.
And what is it like? How do you think about that? In terms of you being kind of the tip of the spear? I'm kind of, paraphrasing Walt, but this is a long time ago. It's like 2007, or 8. And so, but I think that was the most poignant moment and really getting into this whole thing of like, And to Sam's point that largely they are marketers, right? They are PR heads of a large organization, and they are speaking sort of the larger vision for it, but also they are the number one spokesperson. The interesting thing is both of them almost acted like they'd never heard that or thought of that before at the moment. But I thought that it was so wise of Walt to sort of frame it that way, because I think that's more accurate and more sort of a reflection of reality than sort of the great man theory, as it were.
Well,
I think you might say, Sam, you probably would be the best qualified to talk about this. Clearly, being able to market or sell yourself is the most. I mean, you can be a founder and have a wonderful vision and a wonderful invention, but if you can't market it, you got nothing. Isn't that? I mean, when you look at investments, for instance.
Well, here's what I'd say though. I think, look, again, everyone's got their perspectives on this, but I think if you think about history and marketing versus just sheer product innovation and genius, there are those moments where the product is just so powerful, right, that it transcends the founder. I think Google is a good example, right? The original Google, the insight was like, it was so powerful as an insight. Sergey and Larry didn't need to market very much at all, right? The thing spoke for itself.
It just happened,
right?
Yeah.
Candidly, we can argue about this, but I would argue Facebook, right? Early Facebook, the product spoke for itself, right? And, yes, I think there's a whole bunch of stories and people where it is all marketing and the marketing matters and but the true innovators, right? The two people I admire the most are the people who like pull these ideas or things whole cloth, right? And they deliver them. And like the marketing, it's not that it doesn't matter at a certain point, but the thing does its thing, right? And like those are rare, but they are magic when they happen, right? When the tech speaks for itself.
And there's our business is littered with examples like Instagram that just happened.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't that Kevin Systrom was such a good marketer. It was that it was the right product at the right time, and it just hit people, and they went, yeah.
I think Elon Musk's genius though is marketing products that don't exist. I mean, he sells the future. He really does. The Tesla Roadster was never about like buy this really expensive sports car. It's we're going to sell this sports car, and that's going to fund the creation of a mainstream electric vehicle. And the
contrarian argument is Tesla versus Edison, where arguably Tesla had the better technology, but Edison had the better marketing.
Yeah, and what I'd say about that, Leo, it's interesting is I think a lot of technologists or people who kind of know the history revere Tesla and hate Edison, right? But Edison's the one who changed the world, right? And I think that's kind of like the reality of these things is like, it depends how elitist you want to be about this to some degree and how much you know, right? And I think there's a lot to revere. I certainly revere what I consider the true innovators, the real breakthroughs, right? But I think it's hard to argue from a great man theory perspective that a lot of the times the people who bring it to market, make it happen, are kind of dicks, right? But they are the ones that change the world,
That's
right? Like,
here's to the dicks. All right. Sam Lessin. There you go. We got Sam, we got Owen Thomas, we got Jason Hiner, we got a panel. We got a great panel. We will talk about Google, the trial of the century, perhaps. It's a little early in the century to declare it, but it's going to be a big one in just a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor. Aren't you glad you're watching today? Yeah, thank you for being here, all three of you. Our show today brought to you by ExpressVPN, internet service providers. ISPs, God, it just drives me. They're basically monopolies, right? They act... They're monopolies in the region they serve. And in worse, not only do you not have a choice, but they log your internet activity and perfectly legally sell that data right along to data brokers or advertisers or whoever. If you want privacy on the internet, you got to start with your ISP. They see everything you do unless you're using ExpressVPN. Now, I know there are many VPNs out there. You have many choices. There's even free VPNs, but I got to tell you, the only one I use and trust is ExpressVPN, and it's very simple. ExpressVPN protects your privacy. See, if you use ExpressVPN, sure, your ISP can't see anything you're doing online, But at some point, you have to emerge in the public internet. And so that means you have to trust that VPN provider to be better than your ISP. You want a VPN provider that does not log, that does not keep track of what you're up to. ExpressVPN is absolutely private. Not only can you pay in crypto in ways that your privacy is protected, they go the extra mile to keep you private. They created something they call trusted server technology. By the way, this has all been vetted by independent third-party auditors. So, and by the way, excellent article on Bleeping Computer describing this as well. They created the trusted server technology. When you press that big button on your ExpressVPN app, iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, Linux, even on routers, when you start up the VPN, it spins up a trusted server in the network operations center that you're working with, and they're all over the world, so you can choose any region you want. In RAM, sandboxed. It can't write to the hard drive. Even if somebody... If an evil employee decided we want to keep track of what Leo's up to, it can't. It's running in RAM, and as soon as you close that connection, it's gone, as is every trace of your visit. But as if this weren't enough, ExpressVPN servers run a special Debian distribution that automatically wipes the drive and starts over fresh every day. There is no trace of your visit. It's doubly protected, belts and suspenders. You can't say that for your ISP. They keep track of the people you've messaged, the sites you've visited, the videos you've watched, and they sell that on for profit. So do Google, so does Facebook, so does everybody. ExpressVPN hides your online activity from your ISP. Download the app, tap a button, you're protected. They have routers on their site. They sell actually, we've vetted the routers. They're quite good. If you want, you can even put it on your own router. If it's supported, all that information is expressvpn.com/twit. And here's the best thing about ExpressVPN. No, it's not free. You're paying them it's roughly $7 a month. But they take that money and they invest it in bandwidth. They invest it in rotating their IP addresses. They invest it in servers all over the world. And they do it so that your connection is fast enough to watch HD video. It's the fastest VPN I've ever used. That's why ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET, by Wired, by TechRadar, by countless others. It's the only one I use and trust. Visit expressvpn.com/twit, expressvpn.com/twit, and you'll get 3 extra months free with a 1-year package. That's the best deal. expressvpn.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of this week in tech.
Hey, Leo, can I say something that relates to ExpressVPN and to the Google story we're going to talk about in a second?
Yes.
So ExpressVPN is the #1. It's on our list of best VPNs we also have on CNET. We have them as our
unsolicited, ladies and gentlemen. I've never met this man before in my life.
Exactly.
There's nothing up my sleeve. Go ahead. Okay.
That was not a paid placement. So, and then also Google, we're going to talk about their monopoly, what could be, like you said, maybe the trial of the century or for the decade.
Well, it'll be up there with the DOJ suing Microsoft in 1998. Anyway.
Yeah. So once I was on a podcast and I was live in person on this one with some people, and they were talking about these guys were so excited that Google Fiber was coming to their town, and they were like, "This is great!" For all the reasons we mentioned, broadband is a monopoly. They were tired of getting bad service and paying too much, and so they're like, "Yes, Google is coming." And I said, "I just remind you of one thing. Like, does Google, the fact that Google, has so much information on you, does that worry you at all?" And they're like, a little bit. And I'm like, who's the only the only entity on the internet that knows more about you than Google? Your ISP.
Yeah.
And literally the color just drained from their faces.
People forget about ISPs. And ISPs do not have the same incentives Google does, right? They make more money when they sell your data off. That's good for them.
That's right. And so I was, at the time, I was like, this idea of Google becoming an ISP, like this should freak us out a little more than it does, because the access that you have to people, to so much of that data, unfiltered, raw at that level, is crazy. And I think it's one of the reasons, not the Google Fiber itself, because it has not taken off largely for a number of reasons that we don't have time to talk about here, but because it hasn't, doesn't mean that there aren't still threats out there and that people should be worried about their ISP. And I think that's why VPNs have gotten...
Think about Android, right? If you could control 50 or 60% of all the smartphones in the world, that might be a good way to get information about people too, right? I mean, I've often, you have to wonder, why did Google give away Android, or do they really give away Android? Sure, there's an open source version of Android, but customers want the Google version. And in fact, that's one of the issues in this case. It started this week. The Department of Justice says Google has monopoly power. They're looking at a number of different issues, chief among which is the fact that Google spends $9 to $12 billion a year to get Apple to make Google their default search on their phones. Which seems to me like, I'm not sure why that would be. That's just good business, but okay. According to the DOJ, Google has 90% of the search engine market in the United States, 91% globally. That's a little bit of a problem. Google says, well, we're not the only choice, Your Honor. What is the other choice? Bing? Is that what you're saying? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, there's a few things. I mean, my wife, the information has covered this obviously extensively, as everyone has.
And a very good source of information on this, by the way. You've got Amira Frade. You've got really good people inside Google.
So a few things from the information team's perspective, and I say this as an intern and reader of the information, I've contributed zero to this. Right? One is, this is actually a surprisingly small case. Right. The government's been after Google forever, right? Trying to figure out what the case is.
As have the state's attorneys general. Yeah.
Yeah. And the case is actually very narrowly scoped to a bunch of these search deals, right? Which is, in the spectrum of Google, like a fairly small piece of the overall equation. Two is, yes, they have very dominant search share, but again, at least in the US, you have to show consumer harm, right? Which is the key kind of fact on this. Not just being big is not a crime, right? And so figuring that out, I think, is a very interesting one. And then third, the biggest thing to keep in mind is very different than the Microsoft case is you kind of look across the spectrum and really no one's rooting against Google. There was a lot of people rooting against Microsoft, right, in their antitrust case. But Google's done an incredibly good job, I think, building a brand, building communities, et cetera, in a way that it's a little bit of a weird antitrust case because other than the DOJ, everyone's kind of thinks it's kind of a nothing burger, right? And I think that's a very different.
That's interesting. Really, is that the reaction in Silicon Valley? Is that this is not much of a case?
That's certainly my reading of the tea leaves and the reporting I've seen on this, and certainly how I feel about it is, especially compared to Microsoft. It's a horse of a different color. Is my take. I'm curious what other people think, but.
If you stipulated that, Google, one of Google's defenses is, well, we got 90% of the, web search market, but people use TikTok and Reddit and, there's Bing, 90%, but it's not a monopoly, Your Honor. But
well, it's also the 90% that's not illegal, right?
No, but my counter to this is it is a monopoly and it is misused because it's very clear that Google, look at Google. First of all, Google search results have sucked for years now. All of a sudden, they went from being the best to being full of lots of, everything above the fold is crap. And a lot of it points to Google properties. So that's problem number one. And this is the EU went after them over shopping. Same thing. Number two, with the 90% dominance, Google controls who is on the internet. Google control if Google decided to delist the information, you'd be out of business.
Actually, we wouldn't. But
it wouldn't be good. All right. Let's say Joe's Donut Shop, but it would. This is
if they decided to block information emails to Gmail, that'd be a bigger problem.
Well, and they could do that,
and they kind of do by putting them all into trying to put them in folders. But
right? No, absolutely. That's a lot of power, and it's going to be hard to argue that they don't misuse that power, I think.
The best thing that's happened to Google is actually ChatGPT. because they're getting crushed so badly and so surprisingly by generative AI.
You almost have to wonder if they're making Bard be bad just to leave that.
Oh, I don't think they are. They're super freaked out and they feel like they've missed it.
No,
and they're right.
They're right.
I don't know. I think Bard's pretty great, actually. I don't know. You guys using Bard? I think Bard's great. I think Bard's actually way better than ChatGPT, candidly.
What?
I don't. I think it's third place for sure.
I think it depends where you're using it for.
Okay. What do you use Bard for? Actually, the Notebook LM and the things like that, where it's taking existing content and summarizing, and is pretty good. But SGE, their search engine using AI, not so good. And don't they have the same hallucination problem that ChatGPT has and all the other LLMs?
That's a large language model problem. That's never going away.
Yeah.
But that's...
Well, I do think there's this worse, or at least less precise, maybe. But I think that it's the same way that one of the best things that happened to the iPhone was actually Android, right? If Android hadn't happened, one, it wouldn't be as competitive, and also two, Apple would be in a world of hurt from.
There's a long tradition of this. It's no mistake
Facebook
that Microsoft gave Apple $150 million when Apple was 3 weeks from the end of the runway because they had to have just to keep them alive. Yeah. So there's a long story. This is a long history of that.
For sure. But I think that Google is there. Make no mistake. Like, I think is all the challenges there are with generative AI, and it is truly beta, where, but when it gets it right, there are things that you're like, I will absolutely go there instead of Google for a lot of things that I used to try to go to Google, or that I didn't go to Google because I knew Google just couldn't do very well. Right?
If the government is smart, they're going to bring in Neva, the founders of Neva, former Googlers, who created, I think, an excellent search engine, which had AI before even ChatGPT, and had a very good search index that was their own. And they had to go out of business. They pivoted to become an AI company and sold to Snowflake because, and the CEO said this, we cannot compete against the default. And Google is the default. And that's where it goes back to, they pay $10 billion a year to be the default. I think that's and by the way, this is an interesting case because there's no jury. This is just one person that's going to decide this case. Do you disagree with that, Sam? Is Neva not the perfect example of how Google is a dominant monopoly?
You do have to do what Sam said earlier. You have to build something that's clearly better, right?
But Neva was better. I used it. I paid it was better, and I paid $5 a month. That's how much better it was.
It had to be 10x, so much better, though.
10x better is the kind of tech so much standard.
Because Google was nowhere. Google was a research project, and it came in and crushed Alta Vista, which had all the momentum, all the funding, all the backing. Right. But it was so much better.
Google was the exact example of what Sam was just talking about, which was it wasn't marketing. Although I remember going to a lunch in San Francisco in that park that Twitter and everybody is with Sergey and Larry very early on in Google, and they gave us all little Brio trains that spelled out Google. And this was a very poor marketing attempt.
Well, that's almost exactly my point, Leo. That was their best shot.
Right.
That was it.
No, their marketing was terrible, but because they were so good, they won. Are they that good still?
I think, though, Leo, that you're confusing consumer marketing and product marketing or distribution. Sundar Pichai built his career at Google on building distribution. He was he was behind Google Toolbar, which was
I forgot about that.
Right, which was a big way that Google got its search engine in front of people. Like, they would do a deal with, say, Dell to build Google Toolbar into every Dell PC.
It was
which, by the
default.
They could do that because of the earlier antitrust case against Microsoft. Right, Microsoft could not block that, even though they badly wanted to. And it's deals like this. The Verizon, Apple. The deal to make Google the default search engine in iPhone, Safari searches. Those are really important as a competitive mode, and those deals have nothing to do with the quality of search. They do have a lot to do with the financial capability of search ads, because they work because Google can give a lot of money to its partners and still have a lot of margin to run its business on. But they're really important. And, I'd argue that's a form of marketing. And it's a very powerful one. It's just not like a splashy ad or,
Well, and that's kind of what Google's in trouble for, right? John Victor, writing in The Information, says Google has argued that its search engine succeeded because it was superior, not because its search deals made it impossible for competitors like Microsoft's Bing to eat into its market share, or Neva. The DOJ says, no, it's the complete other way around. I think it's true. Google's search engine was superior, but it's maintained its dominance with these deals.
The funny thing is about the early Google days, the search engine was better, but it was also just, I remember when I used to, you'd be like setting up new computers or the internet, you didn't know if it was working. You'd always use Google as like, is this alive? Because it was the only web page that loaded in half a second.
That's right.
Right? Everything else was super late in. And so you'd be like, that was literally, you went there, if you were at all into computers, just to be like, is this thing alive or not? Right? Because it's going to take me 4 years to load altavista.com with all the ads they've stuck in it. Right? And so like, it's, it was clearly a better product. Now, better product doesn't get you to be $1 trillion company, right? Like that's where there's a lot that comes after better product, right? But I don't think it negates better product out of the gate. They're both true.
Yeah. Here is the from Joe in our Discord. In Europe, the ballot. Europe did this with the browser ballot with Microsoft. Here is the search ballot that the EU has proposed. What do you want to install for your search? Google or Quant or DuckDuckGo or Ecosia or Sesnam.cz. And for your browser, I think you can make a more credible case that there are competitive browsers to Chrome. I don't use Chrome. I use Firefox. But who would choose Quant? I mean, really?
Well, this is the irony of all this EU baloney. Right, is like, the EU comes up with the weirdest stuff, right, in an attempt to for all sorts of reasons. And, if I was a Google executive, I'd look at that and be like, fine. If that's really important to you, fine at this point.
Right.
You can have your little search selector.
Because it means nothing because everybody's going to just choose Google, right? It doesn't change anything. What is the remedy, though? Let's say, okay, Judge Amit Mehta, who's going to hear all this, let's say he agrees with me and something has to be done. But what?
Well, they'll get fined and they'll fight it for a bajillion years, and eventually in 2050,
you think a fine? A fine's meaningless. Everybody knows a fine's meaningless at a company that makes billions of dollars a month.
It'll be a big fine, but they'll fight it forever, and then eventually there'll be some sort of moratorium where they'll have to not have an Apple deal or something. And then, I don't know how that plays out.
Do you agree with me that Google sucks these days?
Yes. I'll give you a good example. This is from like 2 years ago when right after the Apple event, week after, and it used to be, you really wanted to have the way that you got up high in the search results was to get linked from a lot of people. Right. And so that was what the Google algorithm was always based on, was like, could you, and today to a degree, it's more complex than that. But the more people cite you, link to you, and connect to you, that was the currency they used. Right. And the algorithm, the main thing that drove the algorithm. 2 years ago, when I was at CNET at the time, and we looked the day after and we searched, iPhone 13, I guess. This was either iPhone 12 or iPhone 13. And we looked at that page and literally everything that was organic was way below, not just under the fold, Leo. It was way under the fold. And everything that was either whitelisted or paid, most of it was paid, was all, dominated and everything. I'm like, there are like 6 paid slots here. And if you don't pay, you're just not even, in the game. That's when it was like a real red flag to me of like, oh, this is not about finding, the best content and surfacing the best content and being the best algorithm to surface a thing that follows your intent the most. It was more about, taking advantage of this very lucrative moment. Now, not every search is that way, but I think it was it was emblematic of the problem that Google has this one-legged economy based on their search revenue, and they were just milking it for all that it's worth. And it was no longer about how do we, surface the best content for your intent.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Sure, please.
So I agree with you that it's full of ads, right? But to play devil's advocate, two factors going on. One is I'd say the real problem is not Google. The real problem is the public internet is dying, right? The real problem is that there's not good content on the web and everything's algorithmically generated. And so you can put whatever you want into Google and you'll get an article that says whatever you want it to say.
Sam, you can kind of blame Google for that though, Sam, because everybody's trying to game Google.
I agree that they're part of the story and the cycle around that. But I think the net is content, there was a magical era, which we all are old enough to remember, when the internet was this very utopian, everyone's going to publish all this great content for free. And, we're going to have all the world's knowledge is going to be accessible to everyone, et cetera. Turns out economics rule everything, right? And, the reason, the information behind a paywall and you guys are going behind paywalls and whatever, right, is because good content's expensive, right? And, Wikipedia is this weird edge case that still exists, but I argue that that's kind of dying too in its own way. And the upshot is
wait a minute, Wikipedia's dying? Don't say it ain't so. How so?
I mean,
well, the editor community. I mean, usage keeps going up, but
sure, but the editor community. I'm saying who's contributing? What are the viewpoints, and how is it moderated?
We were learning that it's a tiny group of individuals.
It's not. This is not shocking. I think there was a bunch of internet utopians who had this view, which I was there. I was there. I would love it.
I'm one of them. Yep.
I think we probably all are here to do what we want. But the hard reality is that economics rules these things. And so when you talk about Google search results, I say two things. One is Google can only be as good as the content that's free and public and accessible to it, which I think has been dramatically declining and getting worse on the internet over the last 15 to 20 years compared to what it could have been. Two, is it so wrong, right, in the Google universe, in a world where everything's behind a paywall in an app, right, and all the good content is to say that actually, to some degree, for most search terms, whoever's got the model to bid the most actually is the right answer, right? And so, it's not the internet of old, right? But, you're looking for a used car. In general, whoever's running the best, model that wants that traffic the best might actually be providing the best deal, right? And that's the devil advocate play to this. It's not what you and I
might
all
or might not. I mean, that's putting a lot of weight on economic success.
It is a closed loop economy.
They might be the best at making money. Okay.
Right. But it's hard to be the best at making money if your product over the long term. Now, again, I'm playing devil's advocate. Yeah. I'm not saying I fully believe this. Yeah, I don't. Right. Sure. But I think directionally, it's important to acknowledge.
Tell Protocol that.
Well, I mean, look, you don't pay for what you got to pay. You got to have an economic model that's going to support what you're doing and drives, right? And there is an unfortunate.
I don't want to live in a world where the winners of the economic game are the winners of winner takes all. I don't know if I want to live in that world. I understand you're in finance, Sam. I understand that, but that is not. To me, that is not the best way to judge quality.
I'm with you, but I think think about where we're going. Think about LLMs and where we're going with that, and the economics that are going to surround that, and what the algorithms think and don't think, and where the data sources are, and all that type of stuff. It's a whole the chessboard of economics on this stuff has been dashed, right? So you worry about hallucinations, you worry about what answers you get back, right? These are all very interrelated problems of who pays for what content that shows up where and what's getting surfaced to people. And I think. Google existed early on at a moment where it was a very utopian internet, and it was awesome. And they closed the loop on that in a beautiful way.
Are we in dystopia now? Is this dystopia?
I'd say realism. Dystopian strong, but I'd say realistic.
See, it is, so look how expensive LLMs are to run. So somebody's going to have to pay for this stuff. And
they're going to get way cheaper. They're going to get way cheaper.
Yeah, they will get way cheaper. Agreed.
How is that? Because what is the economy of scale there?
Like cost per watt and all the cost of basically power and compute. LLMs are just completely about power and compute, and the cost of those things.
Cost of power is going down.
with
no,
renewables.
it's just we're getting much more. They're incredibly inefficient the way they're set up right now, and
So
like
they'll
the
just get
ability.
better.
You're going to be running an LLM on your phone in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I hope not.
I have another thought on. I have another thought on the.
For what it's worth, I won't be because I'll still be on my iPhone.
Yeah,
15.
not on your mini, baby. Not on the mini. Go ahead, Owen.
Just another thought on the economics of it and Google's power. Like Google has kind of willy-nilly, not even knowing what it was doing, shaped entire media economies. When you think about how Google AdWords kind of created this blog revolution in the early 2000s, how YouTube, the YouTube Partner Program, basically created the video land rush. It's really fascinating to think about, and that that power of Google, again, partly funded by this cash machine that they have throwing off that they can kind of funnel into other stuff.
We started this conversation with what if Judge Mehta rules against Google, what are his remedies? I think Sam, a fine is nonsense. It's nothing. It's a slap on the wrist. I would say, Owen, that the remedy is to force Google to stop playing both ends of the ad game, to divest, to get out of many of the businesses that they're in. If Google were a pure search play, they'd have to be better because they'd be competing. This to me is the antitrust issue. They don't have to be a good search engine.
I'm not sure that's in scope for this trial.
Well, it may not be. You're right. In which case, it won't be resolved. But really, the monopoly problem here is that Google does not have to be a good search engine because they're not competing as a search engine.
A lot of people have said that breaking up Google and YouTube would be fantastic for competition because YouTube is now big enough that it can kind of stand on its own.
YouTube. I don't know, though, if YouTube helps Google. I mean, it makes money for Google. I think the ads are the big issue. And the fact that Google both buys and sells, that Google owns both ends of the market. You're right. That's probably not in the scope of this trial. It is in the scope of one of the trials is over this. Is it in the EU? I can't remember now.
Yeah, to exactly that point. Like so I'm, double clicking on that, Leo, is like, for example, on those pages where, when I was at CNET, and we do this at ZDNet too, but CNET's, much larger. And so the impact was much, more significant, was that the, landing on those pages, we were essentially competing with Google. Google was putting its own product placements there, right, ahead of something that we were trying to do to say, hey, we've created this coverage of a product and we're trying to rank based on what the traditional rules of the game have been. And instead, Google is competing with us because it wants you to stay on the Google page, right, and click on its product shopping widget for that. That's where it starts to feel like, ooh, now we're competing with Google for something and Google has complete control over this. That's where it starts to feel like, ooh, it's already been enough of a challenge with the media, the way Google has reshaped media and things like that is like another place where Google's stepping in and has some clear conflict of interest, or at least monopolistic, the ability to abuse its monopoly of that search engine page.
Yeah, this week's suit, really, you're right, Sam. The scope of this is just, should Google be buying default search? But in January, the Department of Justice and the Attorneys General of California, Colorado, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Virginia sued Google for monopolizing digital advertising technologies. It's the exact thing you were just talking about, Jason. They own the entire chain, right? The entire ad tech stack. And I don't know what the status of that suit is, but it's pretty clear that is they own the sell side and the buy side. That's wrong, right? It's bad for the information. It's bad for everybody.
I just think it's like, look, the story, in some ways, the government's really good at fighting last generation's battle, right? To some degree, that's kind of what they like to do. And the reality is like, Jason, you're worried about them competing on search result page with sending traffic to a page. Welcome to LLM land. They're not even going to send to you.
Yeah, they just chew up, masticate the content and regurgitate it into the mouths of the user.
It's, you just say, what did ZDNet say about blank? Like, well, here's what they said.
That's right.
The thing to keep in mind, that I think this, is like, look, one of the great missteps, if you ask me, in media history was early on, Google did convince all the publishers to make their content free and available on the theory that the traffic was going to drive this big ad business for them, and it was worth just giving up all their content to Google for that. That was an unforced and awful error on the part of a lot of the media world. Awful and unforced. And like, they got convinced, and like they were suckered in by the free traffic, right? I think the question that, for the LLM generation and we're going forward is, how are publishers, it's kind of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me thing with the LLMs and where we're going, which is, people are smarter this time around, and where we're going with Bard, et cetera. And they're going to say, no, like that's not a deal I'm willing to take. Right.
And they are true, like largely, especially since they agreed to pay Reuters. Now all the rest of the media companies are like, oh, we're going to block ours until you cut a deal with us to use.
Well, but even that, that's a sucker deal, right? To get paid for it, right? And so it's like, if that's kind of the next generation of the deal, if that happens, right? But we'll see. It's going to be fascinating.
All right, let me take a break. There's still so many stories to talk about, and with this team, this is a fantastic panel. There's nothing we can't do. Owen Thomas, San Francisco Business Times, new managing editor. Congratulations on the job. Sam Lessin, who is, I think the rest of your life you're going to be an intern at The Information. I hate to tell you this.
That seems to be the direction.
I think you've hit the glass ceiling. That's sad. But
it's such a low ceiling. It's wild.
Love Sam. And I've loved you since Drop.io. Which was, what you said, 2007? Wow.
I think so, 7, 8.
I was so mad when you sold that because I used it like crazy. It was such a good tool.
I wasn't.
I'm sure that the economy, the economics of it were probably not very good, but I loved it. Anyway, great to have you on, Sam. And by the way, Sam has a new podcast that he does with Jessica Lessin, Dan Morin, and Britt Morin. Less and more, and that is such a good idea for a show. Everybody should
more or less
check it out. More or less. So they got top billing, huh? I would have thought.
Thank you.
You might have made less and more, and then you'd be.
Well, optimism first.
You should have said less is more. How about that? That would have been.
Leo, where were you when we were having the planning discussion?
If I got no other skill but in naming podcasts. And Jason Hiner from ZDNet, he's the EIC over there. Let's just keep doing this show every week. This is so good. I appreciate you guys so much. Our show today brought to you by Mint Mobile. I appreciate Mint Mobile. I've been a Mint Mobile customer for the longest time, and I wonder why people pay more. Because you get such great premium wireless for $15 a month. And sure, there's inflation at Mint Mobile, but not in the price. The amount of data you get for the price keeps going up. It is an amazing deal. Mint Mobile, the first company to sell premium wireless service online only. No stores, so you order from home and you save a ton. Plans start at $15 a month. And that includes, in fact, all their plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. It's T-Mobile. This is the best. If you even have any doubts, go get your cell bill. Look at it. Look how much you're paying. It's going to be, $70, $80, $90 a month. And then, okay, fine. And then look how much data you're using. 3 gigs a month, 4 gigs, 5 gigs, 20. Do you need unlimited? Mint Mobile has it all. And it all starts at $15 a month. Unbelievable. Use your own phone. They'll send you a SIM, or you can use an eSIM if it's an eSIM phone. And you can keep your number. They'll port it right over. Keep your phone, keep your contacts, keep everything. Or they sell phones. I bought an iPhone SE. Look at that. $15 a month. Switch to Mint Mobile. Get premium wireless service starting at $15 a month and get your new wireless plan right now. Shipped to your door for free at mintmobile.com/twit. Just do yourself a favor. Just look at what you're spending on your cell bill right now. What would you do? How would you feel if you could cut it to $15 a month? All in. No secret hidden fees or nothing. Cut your wireless bill, $15 a month. Mintmobile.com/twit. That is the best, look, that is the best economic advice of all. $15 a month. Mintmobile.com/twit.
Hey, Leo, the Mint Mobile thing reminds me of something real quick that would be good for us to remind the users.
Yes.
Listeners.
Yes.
Which is with the iPhone, if you are upgrading to iPhone 15 and you don't have hopefully you're not, if you have the 14, you're not crazy people like me and Leo who buy the new ones every year.
Yeah.
Then remember that you have to move to an eSIM. If you are in the US.
Yes.
So you cannot move your SIM. If you have a phone and you're just buying it and you want to move your SIM to it. Now that's not most people, but if you are, then you have to switch to eSIM. And so
it's pretty painless though, right?
It is pretty painless. And if you run into challenges, they'll walk you through it. Mint Mobile is actually really good at it. I have a number of test accounts.
Yeah, me too. I have them all. Yeah.
Because I have to, test different phones. So I have one on Mint. It's like $180 a year, just like you said.
It's amazing.
It's very easy.
Yeah.
It's great. Theirs was one of the ones that's super easy they have a good process to move it. But remember that and think about that because it might take you an extra moment, especially if it like hiccups or anything, not on any of the carriers. So when you're doing just plan for that. If you're moving from like an iPhone 13 or earlier where you have a physical SIM to a 15, or even if you're buying the 14 because it's still available this year, if you're upgrading, remember that you have to make that transfer to an eSIM, and that process is pretty great, except when it isn't. And so just make sure you leave a little bit of time to make sure that's going to work all right.
I bought the 15. It's coming on Friday, but I had the 14 Pro, and I wanted to give it to my sister because I was visiting with her back east this week, and I was a little worried because first thing I get the SIM, I say, you got an earring back or a paper clip I can use? And I got it out. And I got out my iPhone 14. I said,
shoot.
There's no hole. I said, I forgot it's eSIM. But so she had an iPhone 12, which had a SIM. It was painless. The phone-to-phone update, it even said, I see your T-Mobile on this phone. Shall I transfer it over to this phone with an eSIM? Your old SIM, you can throw it away. It's no deactivated. And it worked, and it all took half an hour, copied everything over. I have to say, this is something they've really got. They haven't figured out how to buy it conveniently. But once you get it, the transfer was pretty easy. But you're right, it may not be, so be aware. It's a good thing.
It isn't. It's great until it isn't. And then if it isn't, you might have to make just don't do it like 30 minutes before it's true. Don't do it 30 minutes before you have like a really important phone call or a job interview or something, right? We got
to move fast. I got a bunch of stories. Sam's got to get going. The Airbnb apocalypse in New York City. New York City decided to crack down on short-term rentals this week. That crackdown took effect. Thousands of Airbnbs gone from New York City. 70%. City has started enforcing a law that says you have to register your home, that you have to be there. See, I never rent an Airbnb where the owners are there. That's like, I don't want that. Like, then I'm a guest in their house. I don't like that. In August, there were 22,000 short-term listings in New York City. As of September 5th, 6,841. How does Airbnb succeed if cities decide? And by the way, I should say there's a reason why New York did this. It's a housing shortage, and people are buying apartments, buying houses, renting apartments, not to live in, but to rent them out.
And there's already an inventory shortage of housing, and so in the big cities, people are buying these properties to rent or to put on Airbnb. And now, like, people that want to live in the houses are having to, if they can find one and get an offer in on time, they're having to pay, 20, 30% above asking price. And it's just gotten out of hand. And this needed a crackdown. And I think that the time is overdue. And you're going to see other places. Hawaii had already started to do it. I believe Paris is looking at doing it because so much of their housing inventory had been bought up by it.
Would you short Airbnb at this point? Is this trouble or?
I don't. buy tech stocks, but I
neither
think
do I.
Airbnb.
I don't even know what shorting is. I wouldn't know how to do it if you had a gun in my head.
But I do think it will be a challenge for Airbnb, especially for the next like 5 years, because this inventory shortage is not going to be fixed soon. Like it takes time to build houses, and so I'd say the next 5 years are going to be tough for them, or there's going to have to be more creative solutions.
I think it's just the general trend of the regionalization and the fragmentation of the internet, and
point.
like kind of the end of our globalized utopia of openness, right? And so, you have Europe cracking down and doing their own thing on internet companies. You have cities cracking down on Airbnb and Uber and all that stuff. So it's fine. They should control their own destiny in terms of how they want to approach supply and the cost of places, et cetera. Airbnb will survive through this, right? They'll be the only game in town doing certain things.
We're getting an Airbnb in Green Bay in a couple of weeks, and it's great. It's near the stadium, so we can walk to the game. It's got a barbecue pit in the backyard. And Green Bay, Wisconsin doesn't really care if Airbnb does business in Green Bay.
That's right.
There's no,
and they have already won. I mean, they have more inventory. They have more room inventory than like the top 5 hotel chains combined at this point. Airbnb does.
Wow.
I think it's. Don't quote me on that. Don't put that in a story, but I think that's the number.
And by the way, Airbnb is in the hotel booking business too. So they have a hedge against cities doing this. They bought Hotel Tonight in 2019. And, it's kind of compatible. Hotel Tonight it's at this point, it's full service booking, but they kind of specialize in that last minute, I need a place to, I need a place to stay.
Right.
And so Airbnb could, in theory, just like divert people to Hotel Tonight rooms that it has available.
And incidentally, if you're in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, we're going to do a nice meetup at the Hinterland Brewery, September 29th. Save the date. Put that in your.
I thought you were going to say you're going to do a nice meetup at the Airbnb. Just exactly what they want.
Come over to the Airbnb. It's going to be great. We're going to have kielbasa and bratwurst, and everybody. It'll be fun.
Airbnb is also starting to sell experiences too, right? They have a great app. They have a great.
I've seen those ads. Those ads are really. They make me want to do it. They're really good. They find unusual rentals and that really looks like fun.
That's kind of what I was thinking about when I said getting creative. If the inventory issue starts to become, and they get cracked down in some of these big touristy cities, then I think you're likely to see them pivot into putting more energy into some things like that. Possibly.
What about?
It's just, at the end of the day,
go ahead.
Yeah. I just say it's the same trend. At the end of the day, it's like, look, these tech companies went from things people didn't care about, right, to these huge successes people didn't expect very quickly. And now everyone wants their pound of flesh where they're going to get it. And like if the cities want their pound of flesh, they'll crack down or drive prices up. They'll put fees in. It's just a big negotiation. Airbnb is big enough and far enough along. They'll do just fine in that meta negotiation, right?
Meanwhile, don't invest in WeWork because I hear they're not doing all that well.
This might be the moment. It's probably free.
That's cheap. Yeah, actually, they pay you to buy their stock. It's a great deal. Whose business model I'm a little worried about? Unity. This was a nightmare week for Unity. It's a game engine that is widely used. In fact, it's the only game engine that you can use on Apple because they don't like Epic so much, and Unreal Engine is not preferred. But Unity decided they're going to raise the fees for developers. They're going to charge per installation, 20 cents per installation if you get more than 200,000 downloads. And developers are revolting. And I'm not talking about their personal hygiene. I'm talking about the fact that they don't want to kind of this retroactive fees. It'll be interesting to see. Unity, I suspect, will back off in the long run. Any of you follow the game development industry? Maybe this is one just to move on.
Not super deeply, but I would just say, like, again, I think that's actually the thing I think it's a little bit related to is kind of what NVIDIA is up to also, right? Where they're trying to build their own cloud and kind of, get deeper relationships with their customers and get to a position where they can basically, extract more, basically create more defensibility in their model and then also just extract more value from the people that are using them most deeply, right? As opposed to just selling a commodity or selling something shrink wrapped off in some way, shape, or form. So, whether or not Unity pulls it off, I think it just depends how differentiated they really are and how much people need them, right? Versus, how have they overplayed their hand and they're more of a commodity than than they think they are.
There's not many alternatives. I mean, if you're a game that's written on Unity, it's not like you're going to go out and write your own engine tomorrow.
No.
So you might be stuck, and maybe that's why there's so much angst over this.
I think it does highlight how delicate these kind of system economics are when you create something that's widely used and people kind of build it into their businesses, and then you change the terms.
Yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk did this when he took over Twitter and, basically vaporized a whole economy of, of Twitter dependent apps.
Speaking of vaporizing, the French has decided that the iPhone 12 is dangerous radiation and has halted sales for all iPhone 12s. Fortunately, so is Apple with the announcement of the iPhone 15. So I don't know if it's going to be the end of the line, but how did this get through? Apple said we passed all the tests. Should people using my mom uses an iPhone 12? Should I tell her to stop using it? French.
This is a little boy. This is almost like kind of a little bit of an exasperating story, because it's like levels of radiation that have not been found to be toxic in human cells that are, out there for a 4-year-old phone that's been tested and been through lots of tests. And one French agency is like, but in our tests, it's a little, I feel like this is one of those stories that just like, one person wrote one really egregious headline, and then it just like across the internet. Now you've got Reuters covering it. I could be wrong about this, but this is what this story feels like to me.
Well, and it feels like two things. It feels like some regulator wanted some not important win to get some minor promotion somewhere and wanted to create some noise for their little agency. Mm-hmm. And then some reporter wanted some clicks, right? And kind of like ran with it. And so it's kind of the degenerate case of government and business and reporting all in once.
So the chairman of the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, which sets the standard on this radiation, said, well, it's not as if it's putting anyone at risk. So I think you're right.
Well, that guy's psyched. Who's ever heard of that guy before? Like,
Rodney
he's like, great,
Croft.
This is my moment to get a quote in.
It's not as if it's going to hurt anybody.
Look, my personal bet is these things are probably all, I mean, realistically, they're almost certainly killing us.
Not the Mini.
Right? Like,
that's why the Mini
they're all killing
is
us.
so great.
Except the Mini.
It's just little.
That's why you kind of do the speakerphone and just hold it really far away from you, because there's no chance. I mean, let's be honest. Like in 50 years, we'll look back and realize they definitely are killing us somehow, right?
Everything's killing us somehow.
It's like microwave. This is like the microwave ovens of today, right? Like people had a fear for them for literally decades. They tested and tested and tested. They didn't find anything that was damaging to human cells. I feel like there's just a lot of headline traffic chasing on this and grandstanding. It doesn't look very real, to me. That said, Apple has responded. I think Apple's kind of like, you know what, fine. Well, they released like a software patch that,
it turns it down. Now you can't call anybody, but your phone is harmless.
But that's okay, because then you will upgrade to the next phone. That's great. We're going to turn down the radiation on all the phones.
Sam Lessin, I know you have to go. We're going to let you go. It's so great to talk to you. He is
great to see you guys.
Permanent intern at The Information. Listen to their new podcast, More or Less Podcast, and of course, general partner at Slow Ventures. Sam, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Nice to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Take care, Sam. We have a few more things to do. If you want to stick around, Owen and Jason, you got a minute?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
But before we continue on, perhaps you should watch this little mini movie highlighting the fun we had this week on Twit.
Joining us from all around the world at this point.
It's kind of all around Rhode Island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been a while since you've been remote.
It's a little weird. Plus, it's a little muggy here, Andy and Naco. It's a little sweaty.
I'm sorry. I left the windows open to the state. It's a small state. I forgot.
Previously on Twit. Twit News.
From the very first iPhone, we've had the ring silent switch.
Here we go.
A quick and easy way to view iPhone sounds.
That's going
Don't
away.
lose that.
It's going
We wanted
away.
to make this even
replaced
better.
the button. They did.
So with iPhone 15 Pro, we are reinventing the experience with a customizable action button.
It's called the action button.
By default,
iOS today.
new iPhones, they're almost here. And so it's time to back up the phones and devices we already have to prepare for the new ones. Ooh, stay tuned.
This week in Google.
Coca-Cola just rolled out what is being referred to as a collection of soda experiences driven by AI.
I just asked Claude. It created a drink called Futuristic Fizz. 1 cup lemon lime soda. Hey, you can't do that.
It's not actually suggesting adding real cocaine.
Well, let's see here, Claude. Include cocaine. Let's see. Oh, no. I cannot recommend adding illegal or dangerous substances.
Twit.
There you go. That was our AI creating soda segment. Didn't see that one coming.
Hey, special thanks to both Jason Howell, and Micah Sargent for filling in for me on This Week in Google, Security Now, Windows Weekly, letting me go out to Rhode Island to visit Mom, and I did do a part of the Apple thing in MacBreak Weekly from Rhode Island. That was you know I have a real appreciation, Jason and Owen, now for this is hard to do if you're not in the studio. I didn't realize how hard, actually.
It can be.
I apologize for
get used to it.
Torturing you guys.
Plus, you've got that awesome wing chair. Like,
oh
I
yeah.
feel like,
ooh.
Someday COVID will be over, and you can come back. You can visit.
We'll be back. You know what that promo reminded me of is, you know who I bet doesn't have an iPhone 13 mini is Micah Sargent. I actually listened to the MacBreak Weekly, and Micah was on instead of Snell because he was at Apple, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, which was great. It was
Snell
actually,
loves the Mini, but it's the end of the line. Yeah. They're not going to make any more. That's one of the things they didn't announce, but one of the outcomes of going to the iPhone 15 is it's the end of the line for the Mini. So.
Now we can tell Snell where he can go to get one.
Yeah, we know somebody who has 10 of them.
we know somebody who's got 10 of them.
He's only selling them at 4 times face value, so that's a good deal if you love the Mini. This is a horrible story. It makes me mad. Ransomware folks have been at it again. They hit Save the Children. XV Underground bragged on their website they hit an organization, an NGO, which employs about 25,000 people and has helped more than 1 billion kids since it was founded in 1919. They called it the world's leading nonprofit. They stole almost 7 terabytes of data, including HR files, personal data, 800 gigabytes of financial data. Can you get much lower than attacking Save the Children? That's just horrific.
Yeah, it's pretty, I think it highlights that a lot of these nonprofits, even one with, 25,000 employees is, they are not at the cutting edge of cybersecurity, and they are very vulnerable. I've noticed Google advertising its cybersecurity products as kind of its pitch for Google Cloud, and I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't think they're trying to exactly exploit incidents like this, but it does seem like a selling point that if your company is not if your company's core business is not building IT and building cybersecurity, why don't you outsource that to someone who,
It's not easy. I mean, you would think that MGM would have, they've got lots of money, that they would have pretty good cybersecurity given that they run, most of Las Vegas. They also got hit by a ransomware attack. And apparently, according to the ransomware folks, it was easy. It was a 10-minute call to the help desk. They said they went to LinkedIn, they looked up some names of some employees, called the help desk, said, I can't get into my system. The help desk, underline help, said, oh, yeah, we can help you do that. And bam, the bad guys are in. This was right after...
Social engineering.
Yeah, social engineering. And so you got to presume they've got great perimeter defenses, but didn't work. I've seen, images of long lines at the hotels, casino games shut down. It's got to be costing them a lot of money. Earlier, Caesars had been broken into. Caesars, apparently, according to the Wall Street Journal, paid half of the $30 million its attackers was demanding just to get them to promise not to release stolen customer data.
a lot of there are some systemic issues here, like the ransomware problem, and it is a serious problem. This group was a Chinese group. A lot of these ransomware that sort of they're essentially organized crime, right? That are running these things. A lot of times in Eastern Europe or in Asia, in places where there are very high youth unemployment,
right,
is where these things crop up, and they are businesses. Like when we did some research on this about 5 years ago, when Tech Republic and ZDNet did some research on this, like these hacker groups. They have HR departments. They have hiring practices.
It's mind-boggling.
It is so professionalized.
Yeah.
And their job is to go out and do these kinds of things because they don't have, largely in society, they don't have better things for them to do. Yeah. And so I know maybe that's a little beyond the scope of our podcast, but I
think in some cases it's government though. The Save the Children hack was from China, as you say. The MGM hack was apparently a Russian-based gang known as Black Cat. They've been very active. If they aren't governmental, they at least in Russia operate with the tacit approval of the government, right? They're not running away from government law enforcement. That's why they can have an HR department.
Right. I mean, it's kind of, there's kind of this tacit encouragement of an illicit economy because like those same assets, it's kind of like
they're also undermining the West. I mean, don't you think Russia loves it when Caesars is shut down due to a hack?
Absolutely, it's kind of like merchant marine. Like you want your
privateers in an earlier era. Yeah, they're privateering.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel!
That's a good analogy.
What a world. California, this is the final story. We'll wrap it up. California has passed a very strong right to repair act guaranteeing 7 years of parts for your iPhone with, surprisingly, the support of Apple. They finally, I think, just said, the writing's on the wall. We're going to support this. Apple, I think, did get some concessions in terms of security and so forth.
I think it's, Apple can afford to provide those tools, right? Is it Apple kind of creating a moat where the smaller Android sellers, Android may be bigger than iPhone overall, but each individual Android maker is smaller, and it puts a cost of support and maintenance on its competitors that they're maybe less equipped to bear.
Yeah, a good point, of course. So anyway, a victory, I guess, for the good guys. Sam Dystopia is not here, so he can't tell us why this is just one more piece of the rotting fiber of America. But anyway, we'll wait and see. It is a little suspicious that Apple thinks it's such a good idea. All right, kids, I think you guys have done yeoman's work helping me put this show together. We thank Sam Lessin, of course, from The Information. Thank you so much, Owen Thomas, and congratulations on the new job, managing editor, San Francisco Business Times. Now, I remember that you used to be able to get that for free, like at news kiosks and stuff. But now, do you subscribe to that? How do you get it? It's online. Look at this.
Yeah, it's primarily a subscription business. So if you click into any of those, you will very likely get a paywall message.
That's fine. Having worked at somebody that wasn't charging anything, you probably realized the necessity of charging.
At Protocol, we were certainly talking about creating paywalled products, maybe not the main website. But
I was so sad. I love Protocol, but you need to have a business model, I guess, right?
And the parent company, American City Business Journals, has been around for decades.
Yes.
And they've kind of worked out those economics.
I'm so glad you've landed there. It's a perfect place for you and your smarts. And you might want to give that tree behind you a little bit of water because it looks a little raggedy up at the top there. I'm just saying. No,
I'll talk to my gardener.
Owen, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And you, Jason Hiner, what can I say? I love Jason. One of the great people in the business, full of heart and yet very successful editor-in-chief at ZDNet. Just shows you nice guys can finish first. Thank you. Thank you.
That's kind of you to say. And I do want to send my congrats to to Owen too on his gig. They're very lucky to have him. Owen and I have known for a long time. We bumped into each other at a CES dinner of some sort. I remember one time years ago. And so
it's a small world, this tech journalism.
We'll always have Vegas.
It's funny because I bumped into Owen at a Golden Gate Theater at a Broadway musical. So there you go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That would have been a much funner place in some sense, but
what was the show? What was it?
Work in tech.
Was it the Book of Mormon?
It was Hamilton.
Hamilton. Oh, nice.
Was it Hamilton?
Oh. Nice. I saw it in New York and then I saw it in San Francisco, and it's such a good show. What a good show that was.
So nice you saw it twice.
Ah, yes, exactly.
Amazing show. My favorite too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've talked about that before. It's funny how time flies. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much for joining us. I invite you to join Club Twit to support what we're doing. The paywall, it's not a paywall. I almost called Sam out on that. We don't have a paywall. We offer all these shows ad-supported for free, and we hope to always do so. But I have to say, it's not easy these days. All podcasters are seeing a drop-off in advertising. We're not sure why, but it's just getting a lot harder to sell ads. And that means we rely on you, our community, to keep this show and all of our shows going. It's easy to do. Just join Club Twit, $7 a month. You get ad-free versions of all the show because you're paying us. You don't get the ads. You don't get any of the trackers or any of that stuff. You also get access to the Club Twit Discord, which is a fantastic community where you can chat with us, all our hosts, and with each other. And then, of course, the Twit Plus feed, which has shows we don't put out. Those are paywalled. Some of them like Hands on Macintosh with Micah Sargent, Hands on Windows with Paul Thurrott, the Untitled Linux Show, Scott Wilkinson's Home Theater Geeks. And we do those because the Club Twit family pays for them. And they're new shows. They don't have any advertisers. That's how we launch new shows. So if you want us to keep doing these shows, if you want us to launch new shows, if you want to show your support for what is now the longest running tech podcast network in America, in the world, I think, although I haven't checked, some places in much of the world, you can just do that by going to twit.tv/clubtwit. And I thank you in advance for that. Our show is available to watch live, as with most of our programming, at the live feed, which is live.twit.tv. That runs day and night, and if there's shows going on, then we'll show you the production of those shows. Twit.tv/live, live.twit.tv. If you're watching live, chat live. Our IRC is open to all. I just got the bill for another year of IRC, so I'm going to pay that bill. Don't worry, Osned. Don't worry, Scooter X. We're going to pay that bill. As soon as I get some money, we're going to pay that bill. We also have the Club Twit Discord if you're a Club Twit member. After the fact, on-demand versions of the show available at twit.tv, our website. Also on YouTube. There's a dedicated channel on YouTube. And probably the best thing to do is subscribe in your favorite podcast player. That way you'll always have the latest edition of This Week in Tech. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Sam. Thanks to all of you for listening. We'll see you next time. Another Twit is in the can.
Amazing.